And today we have a fun author. She's got a fun book out. This is Sherri Lynch. She's a radio personality, author, and I love the title of this book. It's Cooking with Cats. So, Sherri, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Maria. I'm so glad to be here.
So, and you're from my hometown, Philly, right? That's what you just told me.
Yeah, as soon as you spoke, I got so homesick. I'm from Philadelphia. I moved to Wyoming as a kid, so my accent flattened out a little bit, but I
Yes,
came back
yes.
east for high school and college and went to Temple, my fellow Temple owl.
Yes, yes. Yes. So tell me, how did you get? I know I just mentioned I have an idea because I always have this idea to do a book with my dog about cooking for her because I'm always cooking for her and she's in the kitchen with me all the time. So tell me, how did you get the idea of cooking with cats?
Well, I've always had lots of animals in the house.
Uh-huh.
Cats, dogs, hamsters, reptiles, fish, you name it. And at the moment, I have 4 cats, which is the most cats I've ever had at one time. 4 all at the same time.
Oh
And
my
that
God.
is a lot of, I'm just going to be honest, Maria, that's a lot of cats. So
See?
people would say things to me like, ew, girl, I would never want to eat anything you cooked with all
Oh
those
no.
cats, as
Uh-huh.
though I was letting the cats take a nap in the lasagna or whatever, right?
Exactly, or lick it or something. Yes, I know. I've heard those kinds of comments. Yes.
Yeah. So, I would always like kind of go, oh, trust me, the cats are not in the food, or well, it's your loss because I'm a really good cook or whatever.
There you
And
go.
then COVID hit, the pandemic hit in the very early days of the lockdown. And my business partner, Tony Garcia, and I were on the phone one day, and he's like, you need a pandemic project. And as a joke, I said, yeah, I think I'm going to write a cookbook for crazy cat people where the cats are in every recipe and all over the kitchen. And we laughed. And then he called me 2 days later and told me we had a publisher lined up.
Oh
And
my
so
gosh.
then, I had to write this
You had to
cookbook. So
produce it. Yes.
like anyone who grows up in a big Italian American family,
Hmm.
I grew up around food, and I grew up in a family, in a household filled with women who cooked, but they never used a recipe. Everything was by feel and by taste and by touch. And so I learned to cook
Hmm.
like that.
Uh-huh.
But
Yeah.
when you cook like that, it's very difficult to, when someone says, "Oh, will you share your recipe?" And you're like,
Yes.
I don't
Yeah.
even know.
Yeah.
So I decided that I would write this cookbook, and I would use actual recipes that I knew were really, really delicious, that had been
Uh-huh.
refined by many generations of immigrant cooks.
Uh-huh.
And what I didn't know, Maria, is when you write a cookbook like that, you have to cook these dishes sometimes 12, 13, 14, two
Yes.
dozen
Yes.
times,
Yes.
and painstakingly measure, like my grandma Bartholetti's meatballs, which are in the cookbook.
Uh-huh.
It's a great story. That's my maternal grandmother. Her husband came over from Sicily. She came over from Ireland. He taught her how to make his mother's recipe. It's a handful of this. It's a handful of that. It's a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And so I must have made
Uh-huh.
300,000 meatballs, measuring out, like, what is a handful? How much
Right.
is a handful?
Exactly.
Anyway, for months and months and months, and it all happened in the first wave of the COVID lockdown when we were all in our houses anyway.
Yes.
All I did was cook. And I
Uh-huh.
had a notebook where I would, like, in different colors pencil, I would cross something out and go, no, that's a half a cup of Reggiano or
Right.
whatever. And my poor family ate these dishes over and over again. And then I reached out to my radio audience. So, in addition to having a couple of podcasts, I also have a syndicated radio show that's heard in like 70 domestic markets and worldwide on Armed Forces Radio. So, I reached
Wow.
out to my audience and said, I'm working on a project. If
Uh-huh.
you have any pictures of your cats raising hell in the kitchen, send them to me. They could be included in the book. And
Right.
so when it was all said and done, all of the recipes are, these, and I promise you, they're all really delicious, authentic family recipes. And every picture in the book is a listener or a friend or a family member's cat
Oh,
going nuts in the kitchen.
wonderful. Wonderful. That's a great podcast project. And I love that because I did the same thing. Not podcast. I'm sorry. The pandemic project.
Pandemic.
Getting all confused. Yes, because I know I had a couple of pandemic projects, that made it bearable, and you were able to do something fun like that. So that's a great pandemic project and a fun pandemic story. Oh, I love that you also got your listeners involved too. That's wonderful. And that was my other question too. People can hear your radio show on Armed Forces Radio. Is that where it's syndicated?
Well, we're syndicated all around the United States.
Uh-huh.
And then our show is also carried on the Armed Forces Radio Network on Joe Radio. So I think we're in like 86 countries and some submarines and probably some top secret underground. I don't even know. But one of the coolest things about it
Uh-huh.
and about doing it this way in the pandemic was it gave us all like a little thing we were working on together. And then the finished book
Uh-huh.
is just, it's wonderful. It's people all around the country, sharing images of this is a great one. Cat has a chef hat on, right?
Oh, how cute.
And so at a time when we were all feeling very isolated
Right.
and scared, it's easy now to forget how in the
Yes.
beginning of the pandemic, we didn't
Uh-huh.
know anything. We
Yes.
we didn't know anything. There were refrigerator trucks lining up on the streets of New York to serve as morgues. I mean, it was a scary, scary time.
Right,
And
right.
I think people needed ways to connect and be
Exactly.
distracted. And this was really
Exactly.
a fun project
A
for that.
fun thing. And that's actually how I started my podcast. I was supposed to actually do a radio show here in Philly and do a TV series. Well, all the studios got closed down. So I decided, you know what? I need to do a podcast, but I wanted it all about fun things because that was a time when people needed to just have things to occupy their mind and fun things, not stressful things. You have to remove all the stressors. So I love it that you did something very similar. You already had your radio show, but you found a way to get people to be able to have fun, come together, share pictures of their cats and your recipes, and just get through the pandemic and in a fun, not that it was fun, but to at least have something entertaining to look forward to. Because you're right, at the beginning, I often think back of how scary a time it was at the very beginning. But and now we're just kind of coming out of it and going,
Yeah.
being able to go out and do things. But you're absolutely right. But I think that's such a great project. So how now, when was the book first published? Is it
So let's see. We got it out, I think at the beginning of November of
okay?
2020.
Yeah.
So I mean, I started on it in June, and I mean, I worked like I did my day job, and
Right.
then I cooked. And
Yes.
some of the things, some of the recipes in the book, some of them, I'd been making for so long, they were easy to translate into actual
Right.
recipes, and
Right.
some of them I made, I can't even tell you how many loaves of streusel pumpkin bread. Because when you're just sprinkling the spices in, is it a
Mhm.
half a teaspoon? Is it a teaspoon? Is it, oh my God, Maria, it was insane.
Yes. I know,
So
and
we
people
got
like
it.
go ahead. Yes. No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So the book is printed, and then there's like, it's at a publisher in the Midwest. Wicked snowstorm. We can't get it shipped in time to deliver it. So my husband
Huh?
jumped in his truck, drove to Iowa, loaded all of the books he could fit into his truck, drove home, and we made a mass production shipping station on the floor of our living room, and we got them shipped out so they could be shipped out in time for the holidays.
That
It was
was that was one
crazy.
wonderful story. No, I was just going to say, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but what I was going to say is people are always asking me, so how long does it take to do a cookbook? They don't realize, you have these recipes, but then you do have to test them out. And I did grow up, just as you said, even though I went to school for, the culinary arts, but a lot of my recipes really are influenced because my family, big Italian family, they're influenced by recipes that I've had in my family. So a lot of it, I did grow up with people that did the same thing, a handful of this, handful of that, handful of the other. So a lot of the recipes, even though I like stuff that I learned in school, I still like to kind of tweak them. So it's a lot of going through, testing out. It takes a long time to write a cookbook because you have to test out the recipes. So you're absolutely right. And probably it was kind of good that there was the pandemic, not good, but in a way, because you had the time, a little more time to be indoors and doing all that. And I have a book that just came out and it was the same thing. I also did that during the pandemic. It actually took a little bit extra time because of the supply chain slow down
Yeah.
as well, and getting them out. And also my book usually takes years, took me actually 3 years for the latest one. But hey, it all worked and everything just came through. So, but what I was going to ask you, so is there, like, has anybody written to you about a favorite recipe, or, do you get
Oh, yeah.
attention from one of the
Yeah.
cat? I would probably say the cat with the chef hat will probably get a lot of attention, but is there a
Well,
favorite
you'll appreciate this, Maria, coming
recipe?
from an Italian family. Like, some of
Yes.
the recipes in our
Uh-huh.
family were secret, and they
Oh,
were not
yes.
written down, and they were not gonna be
Yes.
shared. And
Yes.
all my grandmothers and aunts were fiercely competitive over who made the best
Yes.
meatballs, who made the
Yes.
best cheesecake, right?
Yes.
So I had to petition my mom to let me release her mom's meatball recipe.
Oh, wow.
And so, of all the recipes in the book,
Uh-huh.
the ones that I get the most feedback from, not
Uh-huh.
surprisingly, are my grandmother's authentic Italian meatballs. Because if you did not grow up in that kind of kitchen,
Yes.
there's a lot of things that the average home cook doesn't understand. Like, you cannot work your ground beef to death or you make it tough, right?
Right.
Now, we could
Yes.
talk all day long about the science of protein and all of that other stuff, but the
Yes.
bottom
Yes.
line is you have to handle those meatballs with great gentleness. And so I was able to not only give the recipe, but the technique for that. And
Uh-huh.
there are a lot of people that until they made that had never had like a real Sunday gravy Italian meatball.
Right. Right.
I
Exactly.
also I also threw in the recipe for real Sunday gravy, which
Uh-huh.
outside of, the Philadelphia, New Jersey area,
Yes.
they call it sauce, but
Yes.
real Sunday gravy has, pork in it and braciole and meatballs and
Yes.
sausage and all
Yes.
these wonderful
Yes.
things. So I get a lot of feedback about that. And then the other one is my chicken pie. As a kid, I hated pot pie because it
Uh-huh.
was just like, it was goo,
Uh-huh.
and you weren't allowed to just eat the crust. You had to also
Right.
eat the weird thick goo with the one bright
Yes.
green pea, right?
Yes.
So I decided if I'm going to eat a chicken pie, I'm going to by God eat a chicken pie. So I make a chicken pie that has basically a whole chicken in it.
Oh,
And
wow.
it's decadent. So this is
Uh-huh.
not like, like typically, I grew up with poverty cuisine where
Yes. Yes.
you were using every ingredient, right, Maria? And
Yes. Exactly.
nothing was wasted, right?
Right.
Like, a
Exactly.
lot of really amazing Southern Italian cuisine is very poverty-based cuisine.
Exactly.
But the chicken pie I made wasn't like,
Mhm.
"Well, we've got some leftovers from a roast chicken, let's make a
Uh-huh.
pot pie." It is a
Right.
meal and an occasion in itself. It
Oh
is
my
just
goodness.
like, you can pick it up with your hand. It's so
Right.
rich with chicken and homemade
Right.
stock and all of the things. And so those are the 2 recipes that I hear a
Right.
lot about.
Wow. Wow. And yes, that poverty cuisine is called cucina povere, that was so famous in Italy. Some of those recipes are served in the most expensive restaurants, like in New York City. These recipes that women had to figure a way to keep the foods delicious and tasty, but reuse and reuse. There's a
Yeah.
bread soup that they made in Tuscany. And what they used to do is get the day old bread, couple days old bread, and use that to thicken like tomatoes and make a tomato soup. Well, that soup, I actually had that in an extremely expensive Tuscan themed restaurant in New York City. And there's so many other things so you're absolutely right. I grew up in that type of cuisine, but it was actually delicious,
Yeah.
really delicious food, right? So it was great. It sounds like you're tweaking some of that stuff. And using that also. But yes, I do remember the Sunday gravy, and I can just remember my grandparents' house in South Philly and walking home to their house, and we couldn't wait to dip the bread in the gravy. And she used to have this gigantic pot of sauce gravy, right, with the braciole and the sausage and the meatballs. And we would rush home from Sunday church, and everybody would want to dip their bread in the sauce and get a piece of sausage or a meatball or something before dinner, was ready. So that sounds great. Yeah, not everybody experienced it. And I think I grew up thinking, hey, everybody knows what that is, but
Yeah.
you're absolutely right. So it's nice that you're giving people that experience, because it sounds like it's an experience also. Your book is not only just recipes, but you're giving people an experience. So you have 4 cats now?
I have 4 cats now, Larry Munson, Charles Xavier, Tiberius, and
Uh,
Ms. Esme.
uh-huh.
What happened was, so in case people are wondering, like, how do you end up with so many cats? When my daughters were little, they wanted a kitten, and then the
Uh-huh.
kitten needed a friend.
Right.
And then when I went to get the kitten a friend, there was an older cat there that needed a home, and I took her in. And
Right.
then I met a lady at the park one day, Maria, walking a Bengal on a leash. And
Oh,
I just went up
wow.
to her and I said, "Excuse me, but you are embodying every fantasy I've ever had. How did you leash train your cat?"
Uh-huh.
And this led to a conversation. And
Uh-huh.
it turned out she was a breeder of Bengal cats. They're these big, magnificent
Yes, they
cats.
are.
They're
Beautiful.
half domestic cat, half like Asian leopard or some crazy thing. Anywho,
Yes,
you
yes.
will love this. Listen to this. So she said, "I actually have a litter of kittens." And she whipped out her phone and she pulled it up and she handed me her phone and she said, "There's a million pictures, just scroll." So I'm scrolling, and scrolling. I went one too far
Uh,
and I gasped. And she looked and she said, "Oh, my husband works out of town. Sorry about that." I saw everything that God gave her husband, all of it, buck naked, like
okay.
my eyes. Okay.
Ah,
So we exchanged numbers and she reached out to me and said, "Look, these kittens are very, very, very expensive, but I can tell you're a true cat lady
uh-huh.
and I will let you have one of these kittens." I mean, basically for a couple $100, it was a song.
Oh my gosh.
So that is how I acquired Larry
Sure.
Munson, my kitty best friend.
Yes, and I'm always afraid, because I'm a big, so I used to have a cat. He was the love of my life, Tigger. And he was the only cat actually that I had. And when he went, it was like I just, it wasn't in my heart to get another, but my little dog came along, and I'm always afraid that I'm meeting people that have, because I'm a sucker for puppies or kittens too. I just adore
Yeah.
them. And I'm just afraid I'm gonna meet somebody that has a puppy just like you did. And it's like, oh, I think I need another one, or I think I need another. Not that I wouldn't like it. It's just that I know I'll be growing, my family of dogs or kitty cats too. I don't have a kitty cat now. I just have my pup, but she's not a pup anymore. But she's become the love of my life. But yeah, I know how that is. It's definitely an addiction, and it's not easy to resist. So
And
that's
people
lovely.
think, they're like, "Well, you have 4. What's one more?" Well, I'm here to tell you one more is not a thing that's going to happen around
It's
here. Like I am a full-time cat valet at this point. Oh, and we
yes.
also have, like, my husband and I have a pretty big blended family, and
Uh-huh.
we have other pets. So
Oh, there
it's
you
not like
go.
all I'm doing is scooping these cat boxes and chasing them around. Yeah, it's nuts. It's absolutely nuts.
Well, I have one, and I have one, and actually my brother has one, so I'm kind of part-time mom to his dog too. So, and then a good friend of mine has another one that's kind of the best friend to my dog. So I kind of feel like I have 3, and I'm like a concierge, a puppy concierge,
Thank
really.
you. Yes.
So exactly, they get whatever they want, and so that's why, as I said, I'm always afraid, oh no, if somebody has a puppy, I know I'm not going to resist it if they ask me
I
to.
know.
I'll be bringing another one home. But anyway, or a kitty cat. But it's definitely a lovely story. So Sherri, where can people get the book Cooking with Cats?
So Cooking with Cats is now available on Amazon.com.
Uh-huh.
But I want to give you a caveat. Amazon the markup on Amazon forces us to price it higher than if you just go directly to our website,
There you
which is
go.
BOBANDSHERI.com, bobandsherri.com. And
Okay.
there's a tab that'll say store, and you
Uh-huh.
click on that. We don't have any of the Amazon markups. So
Oh,
we're
there you
able to
go.
sell it almost at cost. And we do every 6 months or so, we donate a significant portion of the proceeds to shelters
Oh,
and
that's wonderful.
organizations that help with cats. I mean, this was not something that you don't do something like this because you're trying to get rich.
No,
This was just a fun
exactly.
pandemic project, you know,
Exactly. I think
and
it's
we
a
like
project
to,
out of love for kitty
yeah,
cats and cooking and all of that, being able to
yeah,
share. So it's
yeah.
wonderful that nice to hear that you donate to a shelter too. So it's definitely purchasing it for a good cause. And yes, so if people can go to your website, it's probably even better because they'll get it at cost. And
Yeah, you can get it much cheaper. And every recipe has a little story about the recipe.
oh, I love
Um,
that.
and so,
Uh-huh.
and some of the recipes were volunteered by some crazy cat people who were also really good cooks that I reached
There
out
you
to,
go.
as well as
Yes.
all the pictures. And there's some really funny pictures in the book too. But I promise you, all of the recipes are like super delicious. There may
Wow.
be some things in there, like for some of my listeners in the Midwest who had never
Huh?
had like real meatballs or real
Yes.
gravy.
Huh?
But then I've got some amazing Southern recipes because I'm married to a Southern man, like skillet, creamed corn and bacon made in a
Ooh.
cast iron skillet that a
Uh-huh.
lot of my like Gourmand friends at home, up north at home, have never
Yeah,
tried.
exactly.
A
Yeah, the
little bit of everything.
Southern cooking is so delicious. Yeah, it's amazing, and there's a whole culture and history to the South of the United States. There's just such a culture and a history to the foods and such delicious recipes. You're right that a lot of a lot of us here in the Northeast aren't really aware of. So that's nice to hear that you're sharing that as well. So it's a mix not only of
Yeah.
Italian recipes, right, but all
Yeah.
different recipes. That's great. And tell us where we can find your radio show. I know you said Armed Forces Radio. Is there
So
anywhere?
if you are active military or military family, retired military, and you're living on base, you can listen to the show on Joe Radio, on Armed Forces Radio. We
Okay.
are carried on 70 plus stations here in the United States, and the easiest way to find the one near you is to go to our website, again, bobandsherri.com, and you'll see a heat map that'll show you all the stations. I mean, we're everywhere from Maine, Texas, California, Florida,
Huh?
everywhere in between. And we also turn every daily radio show into a podcast where we strip out any music and commercials and that sort of thing. And that's available Monday through Friday, anywhere you get your podcasts. And this is like, radio is it's been my day job for my entire adult life. Um,
Yes.
I'm also a writer. This is my first cookbook, but I've written and published other books,
Huh?
and now I'm an entrepreneur. And as you know, Maria, like if you're a woman in this country, you just get up every morning and you start working until you collapse into bed at the end of the day.
Exactly. You're absolutely right. You just do that. You do that because I think, women don't realize there's a lot of talent. Not that I don't want to say that men don't have a lot of different talents, but I think we have to multitask as women. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of these talents inside of us, and we want to use them all up. So, as an entrepreneur, you have to have many, many different talents. So that's wonderful. And what's the name of your podcast? Because people can just look up, is it the Sherri Lynch
So
Show or no?
Yeah, so we have a couple of podcasts. The main radio podcast is Bob and Sherri,
Oh,
like the
okay.
website, right?
Yes.
Then we have another podcast called The Oddcast, and I'm actually getting ready to launch a third and then I have another one called Fun Size. I stay busy. I'm getting ready to
Yes.
launch a fourth podcast in 2023 that I'm really, really excited about, that I'm working on.
Uh-huh.
Because apparently I just do not have enough to do.
Yes,
But
exactly. No, we don't. We just have
The
to
pandemic
remember,
did
you
that
have
to
to
me,
sleep for at least an hour, right? You got to do at
right?
least an hour of sleep anyway.
But when I'm sure you felt this too in the pandemic, my job had been really busy. I traveled a lot. I was always out in the world. And then the
Yes,
pandemic shut everything down. And
exactly.
I realized that all those years that, I thought what I just wanted to do was come home and sit on the couch,
Mhm.
that it was too late for that,
Yeah.
that I had changed my internal wiring to just be like, let's hustle.
Yes, yes.
And so, yeah, here we are.
Yes, exactly. But what I think, the one thing that I learned in the pandemic, it was kind of nice. Again, it wasn't a nice thing to go through, but the thing that was kind of nice was, wow, because I was doing the same, traveling all over, like living in different parts of the world and going back and forth. And it's like, I couldn't do that anymore, at least for that period of time. And it's like, you know what? I was kind of taking a breath and just kind of reverting and finding a new way to just do what I was doing. And it was kind of neat because I just, how you make, what do they say? You make lemonade out of lemons. So I was
Yeah.
trying to make a good thing out of a not so great thing. So I thought, you know what, now's the time to kind of be able to sit back, relax, keep working, but just learn how to do it in another way. And I think for those of us that learned or that did that, we were able to happily, just make it through and come through with flying colors. And
I
that's
think
all
you're
it is, reinventing yourself.
I think you're right. And for me, like a really deeply renewed and more profound gratitude for the fact that I had a warm, safe place to
Yes.
shelter in during the pandemic. And, my family, we had losses, we had COVID losses, but we did not um, experience any more hardship than anyone else did, and I was
Uh-huh.
grateful for that. My
Yes.
kids, my kids were old enough to where they lost a lot,
Uh-huh.
but my kids were old enough to where they lost a lot on the social and milestone side, but
Right.
not so much academically. And I know a lot of families and kids are struggling with some of those
Yes. Yes.
learning losses. So
They are.
there's a lot to be thankful for,
There
and
is
for
definitely. And if
yeah.
anything, it taught us really to have gratitude and be thankful for what we have. It's not so little and you can't take it just for granted. You have to really
Mhm.
be thankful. So we're almost out of time. Unfortunately, I could probably sit here and talk to you all day.
I would love to talk about cooking with you. I bet you have all sorts of good stories.
Oh,
Oh my
yes. Well,
god.
let me know if I know you have a lot of podcasts, so I'd love to be on one. Definitely let me
Yeah, that would be
know.
fun.
Yes, and, so we'll put on the website on the marialiberatishow.com, your website also, when this, airs as well. And, thank you so much for being here, Sherri, and much luck with everything, and I'm sure you'll be starting something else shortly too. Well, yeah, I know you have your other podcast, but if you're like me, right, we just, we gotta only sleep for 1 hour, and then it's gotta be
Exactly.
something else to fill our not busy time. Thanks again, Sherri.
Thank
I'm
you.
sure we'll see you soon.
Take care.
Okay.